Today we're going to start Module 10 or Chapter 10, Wireless Data Network Attacks and Defenses. So our goal is to describe the different types of wireless network attacks. We want to be able to list the vulnerabilities of WLAN security. Remember, WLAN is wireless LAN. Explain the solutions for securing a wireless network. So starting off, the most common wireless technologies include the following: cellular, Bluetooth, near-field communication. Remember, that's where you hold up your credit or debit card near the terminal. You don't have to swipe it or put it inside, and just near, and it'll beep. Radio frequency identification and wireless local area networks. Cellular networks are operated by telecommunications service providers and are the most widespread wireless networks. The faster 5G cellular service has allowed service providers to offer fixed wireless service for internet connectivity. Telecommunications service providers own, maintain, and manage their own network equipment and facilities, and users are not responsible for configuring or securing these cellular networks. So we have the first of our attacks is a Bluetooth attack. It's a wireless technology that uses a short-range radio frequency transmissions for communications over short distances. The primary type of Bluetooth network topology is a piconet, established when two Bluetooth devices come within range of each other. Like when you connect your earbuds and your cell phone, or your cell phone to your car, stereo, so on and so forth. One device, the leader, usually the phone, connects to the wireless traffic, in the case the earbuds or whatever. The other device, the follower, takes the commands from the leader. The active followers are then sending transmissions, in this case your cell phone playing the audio into your earbuds, and the parked followers are connected but not actively participating. For example, if you have your cell phone sync or Bluetooth connected to both your earbuds and your car, usually when you go in your car with your phone switches over to the car as the main one, and your earbuds become what's called the parked, because it's usually playing through the car. It takes that priority. So here's an example of a Bluetooth piconet. You can see there's a broadcaster, you have the active observer, and you have the parked observer. You also may have, in this case, broadcaster, and you have three active observers. Okay, so it's possible to do that. One might play audio, one might play video, so on and so forth. So bluejacking is an attack that sends an unsolicited message to Bluetooth-enabled devices. It usually involves sending text messages, images, or sounds. Bluejacking is considered more annoying than harmful because no data is stolen, because this device the bluejacker is attacking does not have any data on it. Usually data is on the phone, unless they were to bluejack the phone and try and steal your information. Bluesnarfing is an attack that accesses unauthorized information from a wireless device through a Bluetooth connection. The attacker can copy emails, contacts, pictures, or other data by connecting to the Bluetooth device without the owner's knowledge. The next is your near-field communication, and this is why this is important, because this also involves things like your credit cards and debit cards that now have that near NFC symbol on there, like a Wi-Fi symbol. So it's a set of standards used to establish communication between the devices in close proximity. Once the devices are brought within 4 centimeters of each other or tapped together, Two-way communication is established. Devices using NFC can be active or passive. A passive NFC device contains information that other devices can read, but does not read or receive any information. Example, an NFC tag. An active NFC device can read information as well as transmit data. So you can see here you have the interrogator, you have the magnetic fields that overlap, and you can read that tag. This example, you may have seen some commercials recently. The new cybersecurity threat is there are people that have these near field communicator readers that are portable enough that they can walk around. If they get close to you, they can read the credit cards in your wallet. So one of the things with near field communications is eavesdropping, data theft, a man-in-the-middle attack, and device theft. Each of these, you should be familiar with each of these because these attacks are important. So the next thing is one of not so much a newer technology, but it's a radio frequency identification. It's commonly used to transmit information between employee ID badges, inventory tags, book labels, and other paper-based tags that can be detected by a proximity reader. Like if you go to a hotel and you have now these, your door card is an RFID, or even a can be that, and also can be, some of them have be a near field communicator. Most RFID tags are passive because they do not have their own power supply. Because they do not require a power supply, they can be very small. An RFID tag, they're susceptible to attacks such as unauthorized tag access, fake tags, eavesdropping, and RFID cloning. You also have your wireless local area network attacks. Why are these things out there? Well, because remember, the wireless aspect of it is just that. It's wireless. It's not a directed attack. It is an undirected attack, meaning that just like your radio can receive radio broadcasts. The wireless local area network is designed to replace or supplement a wired local network. It gives the freedom to bring in your own device in, move it around the room. You're not tethered by the network cable, and it gives you the freedom to go around to other places that provide these quote hotspots. So it's important to know the three different versions of Wi-Fi. The hardware versions that are necessary for a wireless network, the different types of WLAN attacks directed at both the enterprise and consumers. Okay, so your wireless setup starts off with the client that has what's called a wireless adapter. Your laptops usually have them built inside there. If you have a desktop, it usually has either built inside or it has a plug-in, either USB or maybe a daughter card that sticks out the back that has this little antenna. The antenna sends and receives the signals through airways. You have your access point that's usually mounted in the ceiling, and it's a centrally located WLAN connection device that can send and receive wireless signals. It acts as a base station for the wireless network. The access point acts as a bridge between wireless and wired networks because it can connect to a wired network by a cable. Usually out the back of that wireless access point is an RJ45 connector to allow you to plug in your network cable, and that connects it to the wired network. Here's an example. You have your wired network, you have your file servers, your desktop, you have your access point down below that, and you have a laptop, smartphone that can connect to that access point. and get access to those different things. So whenever you're connecting to a Wi-Fi connection, whether it's at YSU or a restaurant or some place that's providing a Wi-Fi, you're connecting to that access point. Autonomous access points can manage wireless authentication, encryption, and functions for wireless client devices. These access points are sometimes called FAT APs. Why? Because they have all that information, that ability to do all that. The APs that do not contain management and configuration functions are called thin APs. Then you have controller access points, or controller APs, that can be managed through a dedicated wireless LAN controller, or WLC. A captive portal AP uses a standard web browser to provide information and allows the user to agree to a policy to present valid login credentials. Sometimes if you go to, say, a hotel or whatever, it'll allow you a temporary access, but then you have to agree to their terms before they grant you full access. So they've got you as a captive. So here's an example of controller APs with a wireless LAN connection, or wireless LAN controller, excuse me. So you can see that at the top, the WLC, then down below the controller access points that will then grant access once they are approved. So in a network, a well-defined boundary or hard edge protects the data and the resources. There are two types of hard edges: network hard edge, and a second is made up of the walls and buildings that house the actual enterprise. Think of it like a physical. The introduction of the WLANs in enterprises changed the hard edges to blurred edges. Why? Because you can go around those, because you can actually get a wireless signal through a wall. So there's several types of wireless attacks that can be directed at the enterprise. You have what's called a rogue access point, or rogue AP. It's an unauthorized access point that allows an attacker to bypass network security configurations. It's usually set up by an insider, an employee. So if you're ever working in IT and you're one of the IT person, and you have an employee that brings in a wireless LAN, or even just like a Linksys or D-Link wireless access point, and plugs it in there, that becomes now a weak link that somebody can break into. Okay, it's you may be set up behind the firewall, opening the network to attacks. So if somebody gets into that unauthorized access point, they've already bypassed the firewall and all the other external security. An evil twin is an access point set up by an attacker and attempts to mimic the authorized access point. The attackers capture the transmissions from the users to that evil twin access point, maybe passwords, usernames, and things like that. Intercepting wireless data. Remember, it's a radio signal, just like your radio that you get receiving broadcast signals from the radio station. An attacker can pick up the RF signal from an open or misconfigured access point. Maybe one that doesn't have security on it, or whichever the case may be. You have wireless denial attacks. These are interesting because what they do is they're interrupting the sessions. They're interrupting the session. So look at these. RF jamming occurs when attackers use intentional now, RF interference to flood the RF spectrum with enough interference to prevent a device from communicating with the access point. Kind of like standing in a noisy room, and it's so noisy you can't hear the other person talking. Okay, so the noise that's in that room is, quote, jamming your signal, so to speak. All right. The attacker can create false authentication or disassociation management frames that appear to come from another device, causing the client to disconnect from the access point. And that's called a disassociation attack. Basically, it's like causing you to hang up your phone, right, in the middle of a phone call. So you have their wireless consumer attacks. You can look at some of these here. So most home users fail to configure any security on their home networks. So attackers can steal data, they can read wireless transmissions, they can inject malware, download harmful content, and things like that. Okay, here's our knowledge check activity number 1. So we have Mucinetta is investigating a security incident in which the smartphone of the CEO was compromised and confidential data was stolen. She suspects that it was an attack that used Bluetooth. Which attack would this be? Blue swiping, blue hiking, blue jacking, or blue snarfing? So think about this. Blue swiping, blue hiking, blue jacking, or blue snarfing. So again, the data was stolen and it was an attack that used Bluetooth. Okay, so it's blue snarfing. It's an attack that accesses unauthorized information from a wireless device through a Bluetooth connection. In a blue snarfing attack, the attacker copies emails, calendars, contact lists, cell phone pictures, or videos by connecting to Bluetooth devices without the owner's knowledge or permission. Okay, so there is a new security that was added called wired equivalent privacy. Why is that important? Well, remember, wireless devices do not use a wire. So it's an IEEE 802.11 security protocol designed to ensure that only authorized parties can view the transmissions. And it uses the WP encrypts the transmission. So you have what's called the secret key that's shared between the wireless client device and the access point. Then you see here where the WEP has vulnerabilities, including they can only use a 64-bit or 128-bit number to encrypt. And that limits things. So if you've been following your encryption, you know we have encryption levels of 2048, 4096-bit encryption. And it also violates the cardinal rule of cryptography to avoid a detectable pattern. So WEP has these vulnerabilities. So if you want to connect to your device and you don't know the PIN or access code for the username or the password to connect to a wireless access point, you can use what's called Wi-Fi protected setup. Usually on the bottom of the router, there's a pin or a push button. If you use the pin method, you can use the pin on the wireless router that's displayed through the software wizard. Or there's a push button method where the user pushes the button and the security configuration automatically takes place. Okay. The problem there, again, with every good thing, there are some bad things. Their design and implementation flaws include the following. There's no lockout time limit or no lockout limit for entering pins. The last pin character is only a checksum, and the wireless router reports the validity of the first and second halves of the pins separately. You also have MAC address filtering. Media access control. That's address filtering, the most common type of wireless access control. It permits or blocks devices based on a MAC address. Vulnerabilities of MAC addresses filtering include MAC addresses that are initially exchanged in an unencrypted format. Attackers can see addresses of approved devices and substitute it on their own device. Managing a large number of addresses is challenging. So on the setup here, you can see you can allow only stations in this list, so you can filter it out so that only those MAC addresses that are allowed will be able to connect. You can add them and you type it in down below and you click on add and it'll show up in that stations list. Wi-Fi protected access is introduced by the Wi-Fi Alliance to fit into the existing WEP engine without requiring extensive hardware upgrades or replacements. Again, because a lot of things have taken place since the first invention or introduction of Wi-Fi, and to have to redesign it again from the ground up is hard and takes time. And everybody who has it has to then download or buy a whole new device. So this just goes inside, it fits inside the existing WEP engine. So you have WPA Personal and WPA Enterprise. WPA, your Wi-Fi protected access, addresses both the encryption and authentication. Authentication for WPA Personal is accomplished by using a pre-shared key, or PSK. In the WLAN, the PSK is a secret value that manually is entered on both the access point and each wireless device. Devices that have the secret key are then automatically authenticated by the access point. Okay, so here's our knowledge check activity, number 2. Which of these is a vulnerability of MAC address filtering in a wireless LAN, or WLAN? Not all operating systems support MACs. APs use IP addresses instead of MACs. The user must enter the MAC, and MAC addresses are initially exchanged unencrypted. Okay, take your time and think about this. Which of these is a vulnerability of the MAC address filtering in a wireless LAN? You might say, well, it's probably not this one, or probably not that one. Again, the more you go through this, learning is an important process. It's repetition under the condition of practice. So the more you practice this, the more you do this, the better you'll be. And again, if you're not sure, try to rule out, well, I know it's not this one, I know it's not that one, and I know it's not this other one, so it has to be this one. So as we look at it, it's going to be your MAC addresses are initially exchanged unencrypted. Filtering by MAC addresses has several vulnerabilities. MAC addresses are initially exchanged between wireless devices and the access point in an unencrypted format. You keep hearing about this, and this is one of the reasons that cybersecurity and security in itself is such a big thing. When they built the TCP/IP stack, all the protocols, the web protocols, HTTP, POP3, SMTP, those are all in unencrypted formats. I mean, the data is never encrypted. Only when you add the SSL and now TLS layer that the data is encrypted. And that's just the connection. That doesn't mean the transmission itself. So I can encrypt an email, I can send an email to an encrypted page like a Gmail or wherever, and then it's unencrypted across the rest of the network. You have to originally encrypt it by itself before you even send it. We'll get that into another chapter. But filtering by MAC addresses has several vulnerabilities. MAC addresses are initially exchanged between wireless devices and the access point in an unencrypted format. An attacker monitoring the airwaves could easily see the MAC address of an approved device and then substitute it on their own device. So, Wi-Fi protected access 2, which is the second version of the Wi-Fi protected access. WPA2 replaced WPA. And it's based on a final IEEE 802.11.i, or 802.11i. And the following are 2 modes again, personal and enterprise. And it addresses the 2 major security areas of WLANs, encryption and authentication. So WPA2 brings in encryption and authentication into the picture. The encryption protocol used for WPA2 is the counter mode with cipher block chaining messages authentication code protocol, or CCMP for short. It specifies the uses of CCM with AES. Now, you see AES, if you remember from your networking, AES was the top of the line on shared encryption. That's your symmetric encryption. The cipher block chaining message authentication code, CBC-MAC, component of the CCMP, provides data integrity and authentication. The authentication for the WPA2 enterprise model uses the IEEE 802.1x standard. This standard provides a greater degree of security, again, by implementing port-based authentication. You can see as we go along, they're improving things one step at a time here. And you can see the IEEE 802.1x process. You start on the right, where step one, the supplicant asks to join the network, and the authenticator asks the supplicant to verify their identity. Supplicant sends identity to the authenticator. On the left, the authenticator passes the identity to the authentication server. The authentication server verifies the identity, and then 6, the supplicant is approved to join the network. Then you have your Extensible Authentication Protocol, or your EAP. That's a framework for transporting authentication protocols. It defines a message format and uses 4 types of packets: the request, the response, success, and failure. So a common EAP protocol is Protected EAP, or PEAP. PEAP simplifies deployment of 802.1x by using Microsoft Windows logins and passwords. It creates encrypted channels between client and authentication server. So here you have EAP-TLS. Remember, you can see that's TLS now, not SSL. EAP-TTLS, that's TLS, it uses tunneling, security tunnels. And EAP-FAST, that's using credential form of authentication such as passwords and tokens. And you can see WPA2 was now replaced with WPA3, the next generation of Wi-Fi protected access. Security improvements of WPA include the following. Now they've added simultaneous authentication of equals, or SAE. It's designed to increase security at the time of the handshake when the keys are being exchanged. When using open or public Wi-Fi networks, WPA3 applies individual data encryption. WPA3 has improved interaction capabilities with the Internet of Things devices. So with the plethora of Internet of Things devices that are out in the world and more growing each day, this becomes an important aspect as far as wireless technology. So you have an additional wireless security protections. Okay, some additional wireless security protections. It's important considerations must be taken into account when installing a new WLAN for an organization. All areas of the building should have adequate wireless coverage, which is we'll talk about later, what's called an overlap. So each of the wireless access points, if not set up in a mesh network, should overlap each other so that there's no blind spots or dead spots that someone doesn't have any coverage. All employees must have a reasonable amount of bandwidth. That's important too. You can't just give one person most all the bandwidth and the other ones are struggling along. A minimum amount of wireless signal should bleed outside the walls of the building. That way you know that you're covering all the way up to the wall itself. This is where a site survey, which is an in-depth examination and analysis of a wireless LAN site, should be considered. Some access point configurations are designed to limit the spread of the wireless RF signal so that the minimum amount of signal extends past the physical boundaries of the enterprise to be accessible to outsiders. It's kind of like if you set up a wireless at your house, and say you go outside in the garage, you might have a little bit of a wireless signal. Signal strength settings. Some access points allow the adjustments of the power levels at which the local area network LAN transmits. You have your spectrum selection. Some access points provide the ability to adjust frequency spectrum settings, including the frequency band, channel selection, and channel width. The antenna placement and type. The access point should be located near the center of the coverage area. They should be secured high on a wall. So if you look at YSU in the ceiling, in the classroom, they're up on the ceiling. Or if you're in like a hotel, sometimes you'll see them up on the ceiling of the rooms. And they should be secured high on a wall to reduce signal obstruction and to deter theft. If possible, the access point and the antenna should be positioned so that a minimal amount of signal reaches beyond the security perimeter of the building, again allowing it to bleed out to the outside. Another option is to use a type of antenna that focuses its digital signal in concentrated directions toward an authorized users instead of broadcasting it over a wide area. So you can also identify a rogue access point. So that's known as a rogue access point system detection. There are 4 types of wireless probes that can monitor airways for traffic. You have your wireless device probe, your desktop probe, an access point probe, and a dedicated probe. Once a suspicious signal is detected by a wireless probe, that information is sent to a centralized database where the WLAN management system software compares it to a list of approved access points. Okay, here's our third knowledge check activity. Is explaining the EAP to a new hire. What would be the best explanation of EAP? Okay, remember we talked about EAP. Is it the transport protocol that's used in TCP/IP for authentication? Is it the framework for transporting authentication protocols? Is it a subset of WPA2? Is it a technology used by IEEE 802.11 for encryption? And this is where these terms in the textbook there are a lot of terms to know and acronyms to know. So you need to then make sure you're okay with these. Okay, so what would be the best way of explaining an EAP? And that's B, it's a framework for transporting authentication protocols. Despite, quote, protocol in its name, EAP is actually a framework for transporting authentication protocols instead of the authentication protocol itself. EAP essentially defines the format of the messages and uses 4 types of packets. Okay, I think we've reached the end of the chapter here. So again, rate your competence on the following module objectives on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 indicates you have full confidence in your competence of that objective, and 1 indicates that you have very little confidence in your competence of that objective. If you scored less than 4, you should consider reviewing the module and the related exercises. So you want to be able to describe the different types of wireless network attacks. List the vulnerabilities of WLAN security. You saw we went from version 1 to 2 to 3. Explain the solutions for securing a wireless network. Okay? And this is the end of the chapter. All right. We'll see you in the next chapter. Have a nice day.